everyone, welcome to Happy Plate. My name is Jewel. Instead of telling you a story today, we are actually going to talk about some of the trendy fads that took place throughout history. And I'm very, very excited because this is our first episode that we are eating ramyun. We've got just an oba pork ramyun bowl here with some soy sauce marinated eggs. It smells amazing. Kimchi and some kim or seaweed. Let's do first bites so I can dig into this bowl and then we'll go through our list. Ready?
Smells so good.
I know. All right, here we go. First bites. The broth is really good. All right, let's try the egg. Oh my God. You think a brown tinted egg should not taste that good?
I know.
It does. Woo.
Oh my God.
Okay, everyone, are you ready to hear our list of very odd trends and fads that have taken place over the years?
Sure are.
Okay, so let's start in the 1900s. There was this game called the ring turning game. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
So the ring turning game was kind of a social game for young women. If they saw a man who had a ring on his finger, they would have to go up to him and politely turn his ring 2 to 3 turns on his finger. And then they'd have to find spot another guy with a ring on, and they would do the same thing. They would politely turn his ring 2 to 3 times on his finger, and they had to keep repeating this until they hit 24 turns. And then the very next man that they shook hands with would be the man they married.
Oh my God.
And then, this became so popular that there were employers who were threatening to fire employees for wasting so many hours during the day playing this.
That's so weird.
And they would they would have signs posted like no ring turning game during business hours.
That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
I've never heard this
that.
game before either.
Yeah.
So that's the early 1900s. It was the late 1890s into the early 1900s.
So like post-plague.
They were very bored. All right, next decade, we're going into the 1920s, the roaring 20s, the golden era, the flappers and the parties, but that's not what we're talking about at all. We're gonna talk about pole sitting.
Wait, I've heard of pole sitting.
Have you?
But I don't know what it is, and I don't know if I heard it in the right context.
Okay, so this is another weird one. Kids would climb to the top of telephone poles
And sit on the
and
top.
perch on the top of a telephone pole and just sit there like all day long. They would even like craft their own seats and bring them up with them, and like they would make their own seats and they would just sit there on top of so you'd be like
driving up a telephone pole holding a seat.
I know, I don't know. kids are crafty. But then you imagine just like driving through town and you're like, oh my God, there's like children sitting up on all the telephone poles.
You drive through town, you're like, oh look, there's a pair of shoes up there, but instead it's a child.
A whole child in those shoes, yeah. So they say some kids, like, there was always that rule, like, be home before the lights come on or before it gets dark. But the kids who were allowed to do whatever they wanted would stay up for like a day to 2 days. They said it wasn't
on poles.
It wasn't unheard of that they'd spend up to 2 days just sitting on a pole before their parents would make them, because they would like challenge each other. So it's like, this is my pole, that's your pole over there, and I'm gonna sit here till I see you go down.
Yeah.
All right, we are going into the 1930s, the decade of the Depression. The fad that we're gonna talk about for the 30s is dance marathons. So there are many purposes for the dance marathons in the 30s. For one, there were a lot of people who actually took shelter and like had a place to go when the depression was going on. And another thing was, it was just great entertainment in a time where like politically and economically everything was bad. Yeah, everything was pretty bad. So it was something fun. It was something people could look forward to. If you didn't participate, you were probably a spectator. And the third reason was because they'd win big money. The prizes for that time during the Depression were actually really high. So there would be people who would sign up and they would dance for days. The longest one, I believe they said, lasted 6 months, where people were still dancing. One of the dance marathons that took place at Chicago's White City Amusement Park, it was in 1930, and there were 126 couples that took part in this marathon. And at the 145-day mark, there were still 9 couples dancing. It just blows my mind, that kind of commitment.
That's insane.
So you may be wondering, how exactly can people dance for 145 days straight? So honestly, these couples were like, they had each other's back. They would take turns being like the dancer, and they would hold the lifeless, limp bodies of their sleeping partner, hold them up and dance while the other one slept, and then they would take turns. They say that people would shave, people read books, they slept, they did whatever they were going to do, they would do it while dancing. And of course, like, they weren't always dancing. Sometimes it was probably more like an agonizing rocking motion.
Can you imagine their feet?
I know. And and this craze became so big that they attracted so many spectators. They would make, this is like where the money was at. People would pay so much money to go just so they can see people collapse. So in the 1940s, of course, probably the first thing that you think of is going to be World War II. And that's sort of what our fad of the 40s is going to be about. We're going to talk about Kilroy was here, the saying that was actually written along with a picture of a bald man with a really long nose peeking over a wall. So this became a huge craze that would be drawn by tons of military personnel all over the place. And there became this huge mystery, like, where did this start? Who is the real Kilroy? And why did it become such a big thing? Like, what is the story behind this? So in 1946, the American Transit Association, they were like, let's find out who the real Kilroy is and what the story is. So they held a contest calling out the real Kilroy. And of course, there were like dozens and dozens of people who were like, it was me, this is why. But it turns out the original Kilroy was actually James Kilroy. He was actually a shipyard worker, and he would draw the picture of the bald man with the big nose and write Kilroy was here on all the tanks he inspected, so his supervisors knew which tanks were done.
He did it? Oh my God, that's so funny.
And then it just became like a huge trend throughout all the military personnel, and they'd write it and draw it all over everything.
So Kilroy inspected everything.
Yeah. I have a feeling that probably caused some issues with quality. But. So in the 1950s, there was this trend called telephone booth stuffing, where people would just try to cram as many bodies into telephone booths as they could.
Did it look like a Japanese subway?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, they would find like every possible way to stack people and like cram. And it wasn't just telephone booths, it was like every small place they could find, just like horizontal flat bodies, which just makes me cringe, and
I was gonna
anyone who's
say.
claustrophobic would probably just die at the
Or
thought. So this trend actually ended up leading to a world record. In 1959, in South Africa, 25 people shoved their bodies into a single telephone booth, and they all fit. And they beat the world record, and then the phone rang.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it
Did
did.
they answer it?
No, they weren't able to answer it because how do they get to it?
Did it all tumble out?
Yeah. But 25 bodies in a single phone booth. So, in the 1960s, there was a song that became so popular, and there was a dance that accompanied it. Do you have any guesses as to what it was?
The 1960s?
I know that's hard. That was a long time ago,
Was
but
it a silly song?
it was a normal song for the time. There were some interesting songs back then.
All I'm thinking about is the Yellow Submarine, so I don't know.
No, good guess though. It was the Twist.
Oh, do the twist.
So Hank Ballard and the Midnighters they were actually the original musicians that wrote and performed the Twist. But it didn't do too well because they were kind of controversial. They were said to have kind of risque lyrics for the time. So the song didn't really take off and didn't become very popular. But a Philadelphia-based DJ that went by the name of Dick Clark thought that the song could be revamped with the right artist and could be a big hit. So he ended up bringing in Chubby Checkers, and he did his own version of the Twist on American Bandstand, and it immediately became a huge hit. And then even the next year, he released Twist Again, which was another song, and that also hit number one
Did it
on the
really?
Billboard. Yeah, like super quickly. Chubby Checkers actually tried to explain how to do the twist dance. So those of you who can't picture it, he says, just pretend you're wiping your bottom with a towel as you get out of the shower, and you're putting a cigarette out with both of your feet. So it's like one of these with the feet going like this, you know? So in the 1970s, there was this really popular trend called streaking. Streaking's not anything new, and it never went away, but in the 70s, it actually became such a popular thing to do in the universities. At a university in Georgia, they orchestrated a 1,500 person mass streak.
1,500 people on mass streaking.
And it became so popular that it was like almost mundane. So like some people went to the extreme and they would parachute into certain areas naked.
Why?
Just to be noticed, because like it got to the point where they were like, oh, streakers.
Like the Tide Pod.
Ain't a thing.
Idiot.
All right, we're moving into the 1980s. I feel like if there's any decade in the past where you could say like this was the decade of trends, it would be the 1980s.
Everything was trending in the 80s.
Everything was a trend in the 80s. It was really hard to pick a single one. What I decided to focus on for our list is kind of a twofer. It was the mall and arcades.
Oh, the mall.
Everybody went to the mall. You'd go to the food court, you'd get your Orange Julius, you'd walk around and shop with your friends, and then you'd go to the arcade.
Yeah.
And that brings us to kind of part two of the 80s is video games in the arcade. So Pac-Man, Atari. So definitely 80s. The list could have been huge, but we're sticking with the mall and the arcades in the mall.
Was definitely. Yeah. Like when I think of the 80s and the mall, I think of Stranger Things because
Me too!
last season.
As I was talking about it, I
Yeah.
was picturing Stranger Things in my head.
Yeah, which is weird.
All right, we just have a couple of decades left that we're gonna go over, but I'm gonna keep on eating so my ramen does not get cold. I'm gonna take my last bite. It's not technically gonna be my last bite. I'm gonna totally drink this off camera. But I figured since it's the last like solid bite we have, then we'll do it together. Okay.
That's a lot of pork pop.
Just as good as the first. All right, we're getting close to the end of our list. We are at the 1990s, which is kind of sort of more like our sort of like childhood. So, do you have any idea what it could be?
Pogs.
Oh my god, that's a good one. No.
The Skip It.
Nope.
Polly Pocket.
No, I loved Polly Pocket. Okay. Good guesses, but no. The 1990s, I picked Beanie Babies.
Oh yeah, Beanie Babies, yeah.
So Beanie Babies were such a craze. So Thai was the name of the company. I also pronounce it TY. I'm really not sure which one's correct, so I apologize. But they were the company that created these. They started off as just like small little stuffies that were full of beans, and they were called Beanie Babies. All different kinds of animals, all different colors, and they just took off immediately. I remember being a kid and being obsessed. We were all obsessed with them.
Yep.
So these Beanie Babies became such a craze. There was even one couple who were going through a divorce. They actually had a collection that they had spent $5,000 on Beanie Babies. And they actually physically brought all of their Beanie Babies to court and had to individually separate them because it was like their most important asset.
Wow.
Which is nuts. So all these years later, even though the Beanie Baby fad did die down, there are some that are worth a ton of money still.
Thousands of dollars.
Thousands of dollars. We're gonna go over some of the highest valued Beanie Babies. Some of them are worth like a ton of money in groups. Like if you have the set of 3, it's like 160,000 or whatever. But we're gonna go over some of the ones that you and I probably had as kids.
Individual ones?
Yeah, exactly. So, Brownie the Bear. Do you remember this? Just the plain
Yes.
brown bear. It was one of the OG Beanie Babies, right? $20,000 this is worth. So this next one I think is one that we probably all had. I don't know why. I just remember like every one of my friends had it. I think we had it.
Bear?
Valentino?
Oh yeah.
Valentino the bear. White bear,
Valentine's
red
Day
heart.
bear.
Yeah. Yep.
Everyone
This one's
had
worth
that.
$42,300.
Lily has that.
All right, let's get political. Lefty the donkey and Righty the elephant with the United States flags on their bums.
Wow.
As a set, 50 grand. It's a lot. It's crazy.
Sure.
This one I've never heard of before. Piccadilly the clown bear. A little bit creepy. This is worth $125,000 and I've never seen this one before.
That's probably why.
So
it's
probably
worth
it's
that
probably
much.
why.
Super
Yeah.
rare. They probably only made like a handful.
Yeah. All right, this one I know everybody had. I don't know why. I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I grew up with you. Bubbles, the fish.
I don't remember Bubbles.
You don't?
No.
I remember Bubbles. $129,000.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, for a fish. Now it's time for me to reveal which Beanie Baby is worth the most money. Dun da da da! It is Princess Bear, which is the purple bear that had the white rose on the chest.
Did it have a...
It was...
Oh, the Princess Bear.
Yeah, it was made to honor the late Princess Diana.
Right. Yeah.
That is worth $500,000.
Holy mo-
So if you have Princess Bear out there, make sure the tag is still on it in good shape.
Yeah.
500 G's.
Wow. That's insane.
Insane. That's insane money.
But that...
All right, so we have come up to the 2000s. This trend first became popular in the 90s in England, but it made its way to the States and actually didn't become popular until 2011. Are you ready? We are going to talk about planking. So planking became, it seems like a sensational hit like overnight. People were planking everywhere. They were taking pictures, they were posting to social media, they were taking videos, and it was like the weirdest spot, like the weirder the spot that you planked, it was like the cooler you were, it seemed. This fad became so crazy that there were people who were dealing with consequences to their planking. There were one big group of people who all worked together that planned like this big planking, like group planking. And of course they recorded it and posted to social media and they all ended up getting suspended because they were at work when they were doing it. Then there was one man in Australia who was planking on the 7th floor balcony and he fell off and died.
Wow.
Yep. And then there were just people getting arrested left and right because they were trying to find places to plank and they were incredibly dangerous, like the top of moving cars.
Yeah.
So,
And now it's just the worst, like, possible thing to do in fitness. Like,
yeah. Now people plank just to burn calories.
yeah. When we were little, Dad would have us do military exercises as punishment.
Yeah.
For
Push-up
anyone.
position, that's planking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
basically. It's tough having a military dad. But worth it! Love you, Dad. That's all I got.
I have one
You do?
for pandemic times, I guess.
Ooh, okay. From the pandemic.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't think you'll know it.
I don't
You're
know.
not on the internet.
Not very
That
often. Yeah, what is it?
It was the milk crate steps. People would gather in like groups, and they would set up these huge like pyramids of milk crates. But they would set it up in like step formation.
Yeah?
And they would climb up.
Yeah?
And then climb down.
And then
right?
what?
But do you know how wobbly those are when they're not locked into place?
Oh my god.
It almost always ended up with somebody falling like and landing on top of crates and crates landing on it was,
So what was the point? To try and get up and across without
Yeah.
it collapsing?
Yeah.
I would not risk my life for that.
Dude.
All right, so that was our episode for today. So it just goes to show you that fads and trends are not just popular today because we have the internet ruling our lives. They were doing weird stuff all along. So thanks for joining us. You should like this video, subscribe so you can check out our story next Thursday. We're gonna have some yakgwa. It's a Korean honey cookie. And we will see you next Thursday.